Good evening, everybody, and welcome to WCONA Live, the Writers' Conference of Northern Appalachia's virtual reading series, and welcome to our special Halloween edition. Christina, how are you this evening?
Well, I'm very, very good. No, I'm very good. I see that we've both decided to wear costumes tonight in honor of the upcoming holiday, Halloween, which is my favorite holiday. And you appear to be Captain Kirk on the deck of the Starfleet Enterprise over there.
Actually, I'm living in a shed, but yeah, if we're gonna use our imaginations, it's a lot like the deck of the Starship Enterprise.
Well, it would be today with CGI, you know. They can do that anywhere, right? So tonight, I normally do not look like this because I'm in costume, and I am Zona Shu. And Zona Shu is best known as the Greenbrier Ghost from West Virginia. The Greenbrier is a big resort in down Earth State, West Virginia. And it's also a county. And this woman, it's significant. I'm significant in West Virginia folklore because I am the only ghost in all of United States history to convict her murderer. My testimony is the only ghost testimony that has ever been used in a court of law and upheld. But
somehow I'm not entirely shocked that happened south of the Mason-Dixon line.
True enough. True enough. Well, we are smart people down there, south of Mason-Dixon. Anyway, so before I tell you what happened, which I will get to maybe later, we have an awesome writer tonight.
Tell us about him.
Yeah, so tonight, a special edition of WCONA Live, we have horror writer extraordinaire Michael Knost, and let me give you his bio, which is really extraordinary. He is a Bram Stoker award-winning editor and author of science fiction, fantasy, horror, and supernatural thrillers. He has written in various genres and helmed multiple anthologies. His Writer's Workshop of Horror won the 2009 Bram Stoker Award in England for superior achievement in nonfiction. His critically acclaimed Writer's Workshop of Science Fiction and Fantasy is an Amazon #1 bestseller. Return of the Mothman, Barbers and Beauties, and Author's Guide to Marketing with Teeth were all finalists for the Bram Stoker Award. Michael is the host of a new podcast called The Author's Voice. He received the Horror Writers Association's Silver Hammer Award in 2015 for his work as the organization's mentorship chair. He also received the prestigious J.U.G, Just Uncommonly Good Award from West Virginia Writers, Inc. His Return of the Mothman is currently being filmed as a film adaptation. He has taught writing classes and workshops at several colleges, conventions, online, and currently resides in Chapmanville, West Virginia, with his wife, daughter, and a zombie goldfish. So, shall we bring him on?
Absolutely. I want to hear more about the zombie goldfish.
Me too, of all the things. That's the most interesting part.
Hi.
So, hey, Michael, how are you?
Good evening, Michael.
I'm good, doing well.
Excellent. So this zombie goldfish?
Well, the whole thing comes down to, if anyone knows anything about fish, my daughter's 12 years old now, and she knows the gig is up. Basically, it wasn't really a goldfish. It was a betta fish we got for her when she was much, much younger. And the darn thing kept dying over and over and over again. And so instead of telling her about, of course, obviously it's not the same one, but to her, it was always the same one. She never saw that it was dead. So when we would see that it was dead, we would rush to the store and get another one. And so that's why we called it the zombie goldfish, because it had been died many, many, many times. And unfortunately, we don't have him anymore.
So it was like Rumblefish Resurrection.
Yes. And it was the most expensive fish that I'd ever had. So
did you call him Lazarus behind
that would have been good. That would have been really good.
Right. Rising from the dead.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So what are you reading for us tonight, Michael?
Well, it's a ghost story that I had just recently written for an anthology. And I'm not at liberty to tell what the anthology is just yet, but I'm sneaking and going to read the story anyway. So, because we're all just friends here, and you know, so I feel like being bad anyway.
Well, it is the season. It's your season, right?
It is, and for Lisa Morton, who is the president, she's the former president of the HWA. She and I are really close friends, and Lisa has written books on the history of Halloween and trick or treating, and she wrote the encyclopedia of it. And I had her on the radio program a couple of days ago, and we were both talking about how we're almost every day on a different television program. I was just on WSAZ a couple of days ago, and just so many different things. So this truly is our season as far as being busy, and everybody wants to know more about ghost stories and monsters and spooks and all kinds of the things that we love to be afraid of.
Well, we are glad that you took time out of your busy season to be on our show. We really appreciate it.
I'm honored.
Okay, well, we're going to disappear, and we'll be back in just a little while. We look forward to your reading.
All right. Well, the story that I'm going to read for you, this basically is a fictionalized tale that's based on a real ghost phenomenon, a legend here in where I live is Logan, West Virginia. And it was back in the 1920s, and a woman was murdered, and her name was Mamie Thurman, and she was murdered on 22 Mine Road. And to this day, they still don't know really who killed her. There was someone who an African American dwarf who was charged with the murder, but no one then or since then actually believed that he did it. So, but this story comes along with also a legend that is going on. So I'll read you the story. That's just a little bit of backstory for it. Think she'll show up? Brandon lowered the volume on the truck's radio so he could concentrate on the moonlit road, the only illumination within miles other than the F-150's headlights. You don't really believe this junk, do you, Jerry? You've heard the stories all your life, same as me. His expression was blank, as always. Blank is actually the wrong word, really. You have no way of knowing if Jerry is scared or concerned or just in desperate need of a good shit. Resting dumbass face is what his old man called it. Brandon glanced at the Walmart bag between them. I still don't know why you brought baby powders. You'll see. Jerry pointed ahead. There it is. Stop at the dip in the road. He pulled to the shoulder where a chorus of frogs trilled from the woodlands on both sides of the deserted highway. The mountains sure keep everything dark here. Rummaging through the bag, Jerry briefly glanced up. Know where we are? Well, yeah, 22 Mountain Road. He nodded. You do know I drove us here, right? No, Mr. Big Shot newspaper guy. I'm talking about this exact spot. How does working at the Logan Banner make me a big shot? Jerry snorted. Do you know where we are or not? Brandon took in the endless sea of elm and hickory. Is this where they found her? I'm not sure, but I thought she was found just up the road a piece. He pulled the baby powders out of the bag and probably grinned, but you'd never have known it with that damn frozen expression. Wait a second. Is this that place? Brandon snapped his fingers a few times. The Gravity Hill location. Jerry opened the passenger door. Let's find out. Dude, it's just an optical illusion. Brandon opened his own door to follow. You know that as well as I do. Jerry made his way to the front of the truck where moths and mosquitoes swam and bobbed in the headlight beams. You apparently haven't heard the whole legend. Pretty sure I know all of it. He rubbed his forehead, squinted. If you put your vehicle in neutral in this spot, it will appear to magically roll backwards up the hill. Yes, and Brandon interrupted, everyone says it's the ghost of Mamie Thurman pushing the vehicle up the slope. Jerry nodded, unscrewed the lid, and some say if you pour powders on the hood of the vehicle, he held up the bottle, you'll see Mamie's handprints on the hood when it's all said and done. Wait, you're not going to put that on my... Jerry was already sprinkling the contents onto the front edge of the truck's hood. Don't worry, it'll wash off. Warmth spread through Brandon's chest and into his neck, and you're going to be the one to wash it. All right, no problem. He threw the empty container into the weeds. Now let's see what happens. Wintergreen filled the truck cab as Brandon climbed inside. It took only a few seconds to recognize the scent was coming from Jerry getting a dip of skull. Don't get that shit all in my truck or you're going to be cleaning the inside as well. Will you chill out? Good Lord. He dusted the remaining tobacco from his fingers just outside the truck cab. I ain't never spilled a can of snuff in my life, and you know it. Just close the door and let's get this over with. Jesus, Brandon, you need a beer or 2 or 6. He spit into an empty Pepsi bottle and nodded toward the shifter. Now just put it in neutral. Moving the gears from P to N, Brandon slowly eased his foot away from the brake pedal. The truck began inching backwards, seemingly uphill, snowballing speed with every second. It's working. Jerry leaned forward, pressing his forehead against the windshield. It's really working. Of course it's working. The road is situated in such a way it makes it appear as though the vehicle climbs an incline when it's actually descending a slope. Jerry stuck his head out the window. This is creepy as fuck. All right, Brandon said, stepping on the brakes. That's enough. Jerry was out of the cab before the truck had come to a complete stop, rushing toward the front end. His gaze was already fixed on the hood by the time Brandon met him there. You see, it's just an optical... Brandon froze when he noticed the handprints in the baby powders. How did you do that? He grabbed Jerry's wrist to get a better look at his hands, neither of which revealed residue. Those handprints are too small to be mine, and you know it. The powder twisted and wafted away, sending chills through Brandon's back and legs. The treetops moved and swayed like ocean waves, hushing and shushing with scattered winds. It took only a second for Ethan to come to mind when the talcum found its way to Brandon's nostrils. His boy would have been 2 years old had he lived just 3 more days. You all right? Jerry's voice pulled him back to the here and now. Yeah, he said, taking in the developing storm. We better get moving. Thunder slowly rolled overhead as they clambered into the truck. Loud droplets of rain sporadically pinged at the top of the roof and hood as vicious clouds obscured the moon. The rearview mirror showed no incoming traffic as Brandon readied to pull the truck back onto the highway. But the briefest flash of lightning revealed what he thought was a woman in a blue polka dot dress standing in the middle of the road, just mere feet from the truck's tailgate. Jesus, what is it? Thunder rumbled a second time, followed by another flash of lightning. This time the highway was empty as the downpour began. Nothing. I just don't like this weather. Brandon pulled into his driveway after dropping Jerry off at his apartment. The house was a brooding one-story with a shaggy lawn and dilapidated porch. Lisa had so many dreams for the place when they first bought it. But when Ethan died, so did her dreams, right along with their marriage. He climbed into the leather recliner, the only thing his father left him other than a rifle, a John Deere mower, a Seiko watch, and a few photo albums that were passed down from his grandparents. Lightning flashed through the living room window, distorting shadows up and across the walls. The flash reminded him of the figure he witnessed in the rearview mirror on 22 Mountain Road. Where have I seen that face before? He glanced at the photo albums stacked by the wall, scooped up the top one, and began flipping through pages of black and whites. So many people and so many places he couldn't recall. Occasionally, he recognized the extremely young faces of his grandparents, mostly his grandfather, who was a City of Logan police officer in the 1930s. Flinching at the image of Ethan sitting on his grandfather's lap in the living room of the old farmhouse, Brandon smiled when he realized it wasn't Ethan at all. I couldn't have been more than a year old there. He had no memories of his grandfather, as the old man died in a car accident when Brandon was 2. His grandfather was offering a wide smile in the shot, which was generally absent in all the other photos. The corner of another photo jutted from just beneath this one. Brandon pulled it out and found a black and white of his grandfather, possibly in his 30s, with 2 men and a woman. It was her. No doubt about it. Flipping the photo over, he found his grandmother's handwriting listing their names: Everett Frazier, his grandfather in police uniform; Mamie Thurman, Harry Robertson, and Jack Thurman, also in police uniform. The woman's eyes seemed to pierce into Brandon from the image, causing a shiver to creep up his spine. How did Grandpa know you? Brandon had no more turned off the mower when his mother came out of her house with a nice glass of iced tea. I sure do appreciate you coming by and doing this. He guzzled nearly half the tea, squinting as the coldness numbed the roof of his mouth. No problem, he said, wiping his forehead. I'll bring the weed eater tomorrow and do the trimming. She smiled. Now, don't worry about it if you can't get to it right away. I know you're busy and all. I was looking through the photo albums Dad left me. He finished his drink. I didn't know Grandpa and Grandma knew Mamie Thurman. Oh, yeah, but your grandma never liked anyone to mention her. She offered an inkling of a smile. Everett and Mamie's husband worked together at the city police. She lifted her painted eyebrows, and they were in business together at one point, I think. I had no idea. Your grandmother called her Harlot Thurman. How his mom was able to raise her brows just a little further simply amazed Brandon. And I never heard Gladys say a bad word about anyone. I can't believe that woman was murdered in 1932, Mom. And to this day, we still don't realize and we don't know what happened, who did it, or why. Well, your father seemed to think Harry Robertson did it. She shrugged. Then again, a lot of people thought that. You know, he was in the photo too. Who was he? He was a well-to-do executive at the bank here in town. He was also Mamie's landlord. She shook her head, not to mention landlord to that little black feller that went to prison for the crime. Clarence Stevenson? That's right. Apparently he boarded in Robertson's attic as a handyman. What kind of business was Grandpa and Jack Thurman partnered in? She wrinkled her nose. I have no idea. I don't recall Everett or Gladys ever mentioning it. or your father, for that matter. The next evening, on his way home from the office, Brandon found himself driving just to drive. His mind was exhausted from another overtime shift, as well as from the memories of Ethan and his father and grandparents. His thoughts returned to the photograph and Mamie's piercing gaze. It didn't take long for him to realize he was driving toward 22 Mine Road. There was no traffic when he pulled to the famous dip in the road, but the trilling of the frogs made the darkness a bit more palatable. "This is ridiculous," he said, staring through the filmy windshield. "What I saw that night was nothing more than a result of my mind playing tricks on me. Smoke and mirrors." He glanced into the rear view, or in this case, lightning and mirror. Thunder rolled softly overhead, just like this damned Gravity Hill thing. He rubbed his forehead. Nothing more than an optical illusion. He scanned the darkness, barely able to make out the trees beginning to sway with burgeoning winds. So why am I here? The radio flickered on, startling Brandon. Static filled the truck cab with shards of voice and music coming and going under a fluctuating whir. It was the sound of a tuning radio dial, not the sounds of his truck's digital unit. "It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing," came on, sounding tinny compared to modern recordings. Brandon turned it off, stared at the truck's hood. Fog wisped through the headlight beams, slowly moving like clouds on an overcast day. Moving the gears from D to N, he hesitated at first, and then he eased his foot from the brake pedal. And just as it had done a few days earlier, the truck began moving backwards, seemingly uphill. Checking his rearview mirror once more to make sure there was no oncoming traffic, Brandon realized the trilling had ceased. He was peering out the side window to monitor the truck's movement when something caught his attention at the hood. It was her. The same face he'd seen the other night, the same face from his grandfather's photograph, same piercing eyes. Her hands were on the hood, and she was pushing the truck with ease, and her gaze fixed solely on Brandon. Coldness seeped into the truck cab and into Brandon himself. He felt as though the chill was moving into his very organs, spreading into his legs and feet. He stomped the brake pedal when the truck veered onto the highway, but discovered the brakes and steering wheel were no longer under his control. The truck continued picking up speed when lights blazed through the back window and rear view mirror. The coal truck was just topping the hill from behind him and had no way of slowing down in time. The massive truck's horn bellowed as Brandon braced himself for the impact. Brandon awakened to darkness. Only a sliver of moonlight made it through the curtains of the room's only window. He expected to be laying down, possibly in a hospital bed, but was surprised to be standing. Exactly where he was standing, he had no idea, as the dank room was dark and cold. Feeling his way along to open the curtains, he recognized the bitterness of nicotine in the air, even tasted it. The drapes almost appeared to be moving, as though some vent or breeze was nearby, but he detected no airflow whatsoever. And using both hands at the center, he pushed the curtains apart and instantly jumped at movement on his hands and arms. Thousands of spiders scurried away, collectively resembling draperies being opened, allowing the moonlight to flood inside. Brandon jumped back, shaking the arachnids from his arms. The door behind him opened as three men entered the room. "Listen, fellas," the man in the suit said, turning to face the uniformed cops. "We got a real dilemma here." Brandon didn't move, just waited for them to notice him. "You know what I'm talking about, right?" The shorter cop removed his service cap. "Yes, sir, Mr. Robertson." "Listen, Jack, I know you're aware of what she's done and all the shit she puts you through." The cop bowed his head. "Of course. I also know 17 men your supposed wife is fooling around with." He released a burdened sigh. "Including myself." Brandon stepped back, realizing the men in front of him were somehow Harry Robertson and Mamie's husband, Jack. He froze, staring at them when his foot jostled a floor lamp. All three turned toward Brandon, gawking at the lamp. The taller cop turned back to the man in the suit. "Jack is known for years, Mr. Robertson. He and I have talked about it being a major hitch for our business." Brandon stepped forward. "Grandpa?" No one recognized he'd spoken, or even acknowledged he was in the room. "Grandpa, is that you?" "Well, she told me she thinks she's pregnant, and that it could be my child." Robertson put a hand on Thurman's shoulder. "I'm sorry, Jack, but you and Everett are going to have to fix this problem." Jack cocked his head. "What do you mean, fix the problem?" "Look, you and Mamie hate each other." He straightened his tie. "She fucks around on you, flirts with other Joes right in front of you, and shits on you at every given moment that she can." Jack tried to stand taller. "Well, what's all this got to do with you?" Robertson volleyed his gaze at the men. "I'll make you a deal." He leaned against the sofa's armrest. "You know Prohibition is going to be coming to an end sooner rather than later. Your little speakeasy could become Logan County's elite nightclub when that happens. That is, if you had the proper funding." Everett stepped closer. "What are you getting at?" "Well," Robertson shrugged, "you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours." Jack crossed his arms. "Meaning?" "Boys, if Louise finds out what's been going on, she'll leave me sure as the world, and I'll lose everything I've worked for." He offered a wiry smile. "So if you two take care of my problem," he turned to face Jack, nodded, "our problem, I won't lose my wife or my job at the bank or my place on the service commission." He turned back to Everett. "And you guys will get whatever loan you need to set up Logan County's biggest and best nightclub." Everett took out a cigarette, lit it. "What makes you think you got a deal?" Jack said, extending a hand to Robertson. The room warped and morphed into the interior of a car traveling on ridiculously bumping roads. Brandon's grandfather was sitting next to him in the back seat of what must have been a Model A, apparently unaware of his presence. "Is this claptrap going to make it to where we're going?" the woman in the passenger seat said. "I'm sick and tired of breaking down every 10 miles. Brandon leaned forward to get a better look at her. "It's her." Jack Thurman turned to Mamie from behind the wheel. "Don't worry, doll. We're almost there." What I'd like to know, Jack, is how on earth were you able to afford a radio for this junk pile? She switched on the dial and began bouncing about in the seat when "It Doesn't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing" came on the airwaves. I love this song. She lit a cigarette while still bouncing to the beat. Duke Ellington is simply the bee's knees. A chill crawled up Brandon's spine. "Will you shut that blasted thing off?" Jack said, reaching over to do it himself. "We're almost there anyway." "You never answered me," Mamie said, turning to face Everett in the back seat. "Why are we picking up giggle water out here in the middle of nowhere, especially at this time of night?" "You know we have to take precautions." Everett didn't even look up from his hands. "We got to buy our hooch when and where we can until prohibition is lifted." The car sputtered and came to a stop in what must have been the darkest area on the planet. Mamie pointed a finger at Jack. "If you'd have spent this extra money on a decent machine rather than one with a radio, we'd already be home by now." Everett placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let's go, Mamie. It's your turn to push." Mamie released an exaggerated sigh, opened the door, and stepped out into the black night. Brandon followed Everett as he made his way outside as well. "Don't worry, Mamie," Everett said, walking to the rear of the vehicle. "Everything's Jake." Illumination from inside the car shined through the back glass, giving them just enough light to see what they were doing. "Oh, sure, Everett. Being stuck on this mountain at 3 in the morning is just berries, if you ask me." She placed her hands on the back of the car and leaned into it. Brandon's grandfather moved beside her, pulled the revolver from his holster, and shot her twice in the head before she could even hit the ground. Bile surged into Brandon's throat as he staggered back. "Jesus," he said, leaning forward to throw up, but produced only dry heaves. "Stop lollygagging and help me roll her into this tarp and blankets," Everett said. Brandon froze. "What?" He staggered forward. "Can you see me?" "Give me a second," Jack yelled from the vehicle. Relief washed over Brandon, but not enough to flush the revulsion. "Before we do that," Jack knelt beside Mamie's body, "I want to tell her goodbye." He opened a straight razor and slit her throat from ear to ear. Blood seeped from the freshly cut grin. "Goodbye, you fucking bitch." He wiped the razor and handle with a rag, closed the blade, then wrapped the rags around it. He held up the bundle for Everett to see. "Don't you think it's odd that a midget uses the same size razor as the rest of us?" "Come on," Everett said. "Let's get this over with before somebody drives by." Brandon's chest burned and numbness creeped into his legs as everything started warping again, morphing to the inside of his truck cab. A faint ringing penetrated his head as pain slammed into him when he tried to move. The steering wheel was crushing into his chest. The blood spatter was everywhere. The ringing became louder and clearer to the point he recognized it was a stuck horn blaring in the distance. "Brandon." The woman's voice came from just outside the broken driver's side window. "You." Pain racked his chest at his whispered response. Mamie smiled, lit a cigarette that smelled stale or moldy or something unfamiliar. "Anyone ever tell you you're the spitting image of your grandpa?" She took another draw and leaned against the door. "Everett was the only man who ever turned me down, you know." Her smile faded. He was the only man I couldn't control. During the flickering moment of a lightning flash, her face changed to a mess of flesh and bone and blood. He could have sworn he saw the grinning slit in her throat with matted hair and coagulated blood. Brandon closed his eyes as thunder rumbled overhead again, so he wouldn't have to witness that grisly image again. Please. You're the last one, kid. Her voice was so close to his ear, he could actually feel the frigid exhalations when she spoke. And now it's your turn to push. That's the story. Hope that you enjoyed it. I can't hear you guys. There you are. There you are.
That was amazing, Michael.
So it looks like Christina has transformed to the dead ghost rather than the living ghost now.
This is correct. I have returned, but I will tell you that story in a moment. I really enjoyed your reading. I thought that as much as the story was interesting, your telling of it was really exquisite. Well done.
Well, thank you very much. I guess working in broadcasting for over 30 some years, get you ready for that. So,
well, I almost said you have a voice for radio, but
I've got a face for radio. Is what I've got.
That's why I didn't say that. So thank you so much for being part of our broadcast tonight and to celebrate this spooky season with us. Damien, do you have anything to add?
I am blown away. I was just so impressed, not only with the imaginative, the story itself, but I with Christina, your rendering of it I was so much right there with you. I felt like I was almost around some sort of campfire with somebody who is going to tell me the story and then hit me over the head with a shovel when I turned around to get a stick.
Well, that's good. That's what we go for, right?
Yes, it was really, really good. Well done. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yes. So I came back dead because what happened in this story is that Zona Shu, her husband Prout, believe it or not, killed her. But he made it look like an accident. But 4 weeks after her death, after she was killed, she came back as an apparition to her mother and told her in 4 consecutive nights how she was killed. She said that he snapped her neck, and that's why my outfit is now on backwards, because she was able to turn her head 180 degrees the other way, right? And she told her mother exactly how she was murdered, exactly which vertebrae he had snapped to kill her. And she was so convincing that the mother, her mom, went to the police and said, "You've got to dig her up. You've got to exhume her body." They exhumed her body and found out that that's exactly what happened to her. They used the ghost's evidence and testimony in a court. He was convicted, and then he was sentenced to prison right down the road from here in Moundsville, West Virginia, at the West Virginia State Penitentiary, where he died at age 39 of a pandemic, which is a very interesting thing. And he's buried in a Whitehall Cemetery, which is in an unmarked grave, which is a cemetery that houses our prisoners.
Now, the story that you're telling, every bit of that is factual basis. I did a number of anthologies as the editor, and I had writers from all over the world to come in and tell stories of legends and ghosts and monsters from West Virginia, because we have a ton of them. Yeah, that's one. But now mine was Legends of the Mountain State.
Yes,
And
read that one.
And there were 4 editions of it, and I had one that Jonathan Mayberry, who wrote do you remember the Wolfman movie with Del Toro and the Wolfman, I think is what it was called. He wrote the book for that, and a good friend, and he wrote the story in one of the Legends of the Mountain State for me of the Greenbrier ghost.
Interesting.
And what he did was he took another legendary character and had him investigating it, which was Sherlock Holmes. So Sherlock Holmes
cool.
had come to America supposedly at one point, and while here he came to West Virginia during the time of the Greenbrier ghost. Excellent story, by the way, in case you'd ever want to read it. It's really, really wonderful.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for indulging us tonight in our flight of creepy fancy. We will see you next week. And it was great to have you join us, Michael. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
All right. Thanks a lot, Michael. And thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you all next week at 8 o'clock on Thursday.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
And have a great Halloween.